And we start with the Fox News alert and an 11th hour plea for peace from Secretary of State John Kerry. He will give that about 2 hours from now. You know, there are only weeks to go for the Obama administration. Mr. Kerry will try and use this final opportunity to lay out the White House's vision for Middle East peace. But his address at 11 a.m. Eastern Time comes at a time of increasing tensions between the United States and Israel. Good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Shawn in for Bill Hemmer this morning, and you are live in America's Newsroom.
Nice to have you. We're nice to be here with you as well. I'm Heather Childers in for Martha McCallum. Well, today's speech comes, as you mentioned, at a recent low point between the two longtime allies and relations between them. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accusing the U.S. of diplomatic sabotage, allowing the UN Security Council to pass an anti-Israeli resolution, even accusing the U.S. of orchestrating the whole thing. Something State Department Deputy Spokesman Mark Toner denies.
We reject the notion that the United States was the driving force behind this resolution. That's just not true. The United States did not draft this resolution, nor did it put it forward. We also made clear at every conversation, that the president would make the final decision, and that he would have to review the final text before making his final decision. So the idea that this was, again, pre-cooked, or that we had agreed upon the text weeks in advance is just not accurate.
Garrett Tenney live for us in Washington. Garrett, Israeli leaders say that they will be keeping a close eye on this speech. A whole lot of people will be doing that.
They absolutely will be, Heather. And a big reason for that is that Israeli leaders are concerned the Obama administration may still take additional steps against the Jewish state in these last few weeks before the next administration comes in. Israeli news outlets are reporting that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is particularly worried about the U.S. making a final push at the UN Security Council to lay the groundwork for a Palestinian state. President Obama's Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes said earlier this week the U.S. did not have any plans to do that, and he continued to defend the administration's decision not to protect Israel at the UN last week.
When we see laws that aim to legalize outposts, when we see rhetoric that suggests that this is the most pro-settlement Israeli government in history, and when we see the facts on the ground, again, deep into the West Bank, beyond the separation barrier, we feel compelled to speak up against those actions.
And despite Rhodes' insistence that the U.S. does not plan to take any further action against Israel at the Security Council, the recent actions by the White House have certainly left Israelis unnerved at what could come next, particularly as they claim to have ironclad proof showing the White House orchestrated last week's vote. Heather?
All right, so a lot is being said back and forth about that evidence that they may have. What do we know about that?
Well, some of that evidence is slowly beginning to come out. On special report this week, Israel's ambassador to the U.S. said it included evidence that Vice President Joe Biden intervened to get Ukraine to support the resolution last week. And last night, the spokesman for Israel's prime minister said it goes much deeper than that.
We know that there was a deep collusion between the Obama administration and the Palestinians in order to push this United Nations Security Council resolution forward. I don't think that everything that I know can be shared on TV or can be shared with a global audience. I want to explain just very briefly why it's so dangerous, because it actually preempts negotiations. It tries to give the Palestinians everything they want up front.
And this morning, Israeli news outlets are now reporting that 10 days before the UN Security Council vote, Secretary of State John Kerry and National Security Advisor Susan Wright met with a Palestinian delegation to discuss letting that vote pass. This morning, though, a National Security Council spokesman says that meeting never happened, despite State Department records showing otherwise. Heather?
Will be interesting to see if Kerry references that at all when he speaks at 11 a.m. today. Thank you so much.
You got it.
Oh, for more on what we can expect, let's bring in Jamie Weinstein now, senior writer for the Daily Caller and host of the Weinstein podcast. Jamie, so what are you looking for Mr. Kerry to say this morning?
Well, he's going to probably lay out parameters, but it is amazing that with all that is going on in the Middle East, that John Kerry is going to spend his final days in office, one of the last few days, maybe 20 more days left, attacking Israel and focusing on the Middle East.
Well, how do you know he's going to, Jamie, let me stop you. How do you know he's going to be attacking Israel versus trying to achieve some consensus?
Because the speech itself is going to limit negotiation power and force Israel into a corner when it's trying to come to a deal with the Palestinians, whenever that possibility comes. And I think the reason for this is that the Obama administration came into office with an ideological, almost mystical belief that if you solve the Israeli-Palestinian problem, you can solve all the problems, basically what's going on in the Middle East. I think it was wrong then, but especially after the Arab Spring, when you see what's going on in Syria, what's going on in Yemen, the Egyptian problems in the Sinai, and their even own problems with the Muslim Brotherhood, Iranian destabilization of the Middle East. None of those things would be solved if you solve the Israeli-Palestinian problem right now. So it does seem odd to focus on an ally and focus what we saw at the UN and then the speech today going out of office with the final days that they have left, when it won't solve anything, it won't achieve peace. And what it really does, it seems to be, and that the Israelis are taking it as kicking an ally, kicking a friend.
Yeah, well, the State Department spokesman reportedly, or sources are saying, that the Israelis were not blindsided. They also claim that they will address these concerns in the speech, and that the vote was not unprecedented because other presidents have, of course, allowed resolutions that were critical of Israel to pass in the past. So do you think this will be addressed when he speaks in about 2 hours from now?
Well, no president has allowed a resolution to pass the UN that claimed that the holy city of Jerusalem, even the old city where the Western Wall is, was occupied territory. That was new, and you know, when they allowed it to pass, there was a shock almost in the UN Security Council, and then applause because
there was a gasp.
Yeah, they were surprised that they allowed it to pass. So, if you know, the Obama administration is now acting and trying to pretend that this was not something altogether new, but those in the Security Council seem to think it was something astonishing. So I don't know what John Kerry is going to say today, but it almost doesn't matter because it's being interpreted by Israel's enemies as another cudgel against Israel to delegitimize it, which is what is going on right now. The war against Israel is not only one of force, what we often see with Hamas targeting Israel. It's a war of delegitimization, that Israel doesn't have a right to exist as a normal state in a way. And, you know, I don't think the Obama administration is anti-Israel, but I do think that they're giving comfort to a lot of anti-Israel forces around the world with their actions in the waning days of their administration.
And finally, there's speculation that they could call for the Palestinian state, speculation that could be another resolution that would be put up before the Security Council. But what will Mr. Trump do? I mean, if he introduces one that tries to undo this one, you know, Russia and China, they'll just veto it.
Yeah, well, you know, there's been talk about using some force to defund parts of the UN. The United States has done that in the past when they don't like what's going on. But I think the key point to keep in mind here is it's not that Israel hasn't sought peace. They have sought peace. Going back before they were a state in 1937 when they agreed to the Peel Commission, all the way to 2008 with Ehud Olmert when he agreed to a deal and the Palestinians basically walked away. But you can't have peace when half of the territory under control is in control of a terror group that says no peace is possible. So how do you come to terms with Mahmoud Abbas when he doesn't control all the territory that he's negotiating on behalf of? So I don't know what this effort is doing on the side of the United States here. You can't force peace when one side is adamantly against peace at the moment.
That's a good point. How do you achieve peace with Hamas? Jamie Weinstein joining us this morning. Thank you, as always, for your insight. Good to see you, of course. And we will have much more on all this coming up. Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham will be live here on America's Newsroom at 10:30 Eastern. That's about an hour and a half from now. We will, of course, delve into the developments between the U.S. and Israel, Secretary Kerry's major speech this morning, and the reports that the White House will punish Russia over that election hacking. And the senators will be joining us live from Latvia, where they are on a tour of the Eastern Bloc.
Well, family, friends, and fans all around the world today are remembering actress and writer Carrie Fisher, a legendary movie star in her own right and daughter of Hollywood royalty. Fisher passed away yesterday, just days after suffering a massive heart attack. Her most well-known role, perhaps, as, yes, Princess Leia in Star Wars, and it made her a pop cultural icon. But it was only one part of a remarkable career.
Are you stuck up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerd?
No,
Great, and when Harry met Sally as well. Well, Claudia Cowan is live for us in Los Angeles with more. Claudia, some heartfelt reactions from her Star Wars co-stars, amongst others.
That's right, most notably from her on-screen love interest, who we saw in those clips, of course, Harrison Ford, who said in a statement, quote, "Carrie was one of a kind, brilliant, original, funny, and emotionally fearless. She lived her life bravely." Director George Lucas, who cast Fisher as the iconic Princess Leia, praised her acting ability, saying, quote, "In Star Wars, she was our great and powerful princess, feisty, wise, and full of hope in a role that was more difficult than most people might think." And when the news of her death first broke, Mark Hamill took to Twitter saying, quote, "No words, #devastated." She had already wrapped the next Star Wars movie, Episode 8, so fans will be able to see her reprise her role one more time on the big screen next year. And we're learning more about her death following that medical emergency on a flight from London to Los Angeles on Christmas Eve. She never regained consciousness and died peacefully yesterday morning. She is being remembered as a great actress, but also as a screenwriter and as a script doctor who'd come in to fix a script that wasn't quite working. And she bravely and publicly talked about her battles with substance abuse and bipolar disorder. Around the country, fans are planning to hold lightsaber walks in tribute. Funeral plans for the 60-year-old Fisher are still pending. Heather.
All right, Claudia Cowan, live for us. Thank you, Claudia.
Well, Heather, President-elect Trump is taking a break from his transition to respond yet again to President Obama. And this.
I'm confident that if I had run again and articulated it, I think I could have mobilized a majority of the American people to rally behind it.
Is that true? Well, we will have Mr. Trump's latest response and debate whether or not that actually could have happened.
Plus, part of Trump Tower evacuated over a suspicious package, what investigators now say was inside that backpack.
And the White House, is expected to unveil its response to Russian hacking, what that could entail and how it could face hurdles with the new administration.
If we don't push back against Russian interference in our election, we're inviting the Chinese and the Iranians to come and hack us when Trump gets tough with them.
Welcome back. A Fox News alert for you. Prosecutors in Germany say an arrest has been made in connection with the Berlin Christmas market terrorist attack that killed 12 people. We're told a 40-year-old Tunisian man is in custody. Officials not giving any further details on his possible connection to suspected terrorist Anis Amri, who allegedly drove that semi into the crowd. He was killed days later in Italy, you may recall. We will have much more information on this as it continues to develop.
What I've been saying to people, and this was even when I thought we were going to win, was that that narrow Democratic coalition, the quote-unquote Obama coalition, that if properly executed, yes, you can probably win presidencies repeatedly. It constitutes the majority of the country. But you can't govern.
Well, that's President Obama telling his former top aide, David Axelrod, that if he could have run for a third term, he would have been victorious in the 2016 election. Well, now President-elect Donald Trump is refusing to let that go. He's firing back again on Twitter, saying, quote, President Obama campaigned hard and personally in the very important swing states and lost. The voters wanted to make America great again. Brad Blakeman joins us, former Deputy Assistant to President George W. Bush. Pablo Manuquez is a former DNC official, and we welcome you both. Brad, let me start with you. Does Mr. Trump have a point in pushing back against the president?
You bet. Like everything with Barack Obama, it can't be about him. If it was about him, he would have won. And it was also a slap at Hillary. The bottom line is this. Hillary lost the states, the swing states that Barack Obama won. Let's take a look at Florida and North Carolina and Ohio. And by the way, Mr. President, Donald Trump won Pennsylvania and Michigan, strongholds for Democrats. And I remember in the waning days, President Obama was appearing in rallies in the very swing states I just mentioned, begging people that his legacy is on the line. He's taking this personally. So there's no revisionist history here, Eric. Donald Trump won, and he won fair and square, and he won in an electoral landslide. That's the facts.
Pablo, is the president trying to deflect responsibility?
Well, Eric, I think I'm going to have to agree with Brad here. If we take a step back, the President Obama, as leader of the Democratic Party, his job is to make sure that the party is winning elections up and down the ticket for the Democratic Party. And in this sense, he's been the losingest coach in party history. And that's sort of the first thing that Democrats, I think, need to acknowledge moving forward. The second thing I think that we need to acknowledge is that as a presidential candidate, Hillary Clinton has been a catastrophe, a multi-cycle catastrophe for party unity. We need to look at this thing with a lot more humility than we're looking at it right now and realize that we got Obama high on hope and change in 2008. We let a small-minded generation of establishment deadweight take over. And the results have been catastrophic for the Democratic Party.
So
over
what does the party do?
Losses. And
Pablo, what does the party do to try to regain that? I mean, to go to Elizabeth Warren, to go more left?
No, I think that you need to find new talent. I think that's the first step. I think that the evaluations that are going on right now about where we move forward don't seem to have any consensus. There isn't anybody who's kind of stepping into the void to become that leader that the Democratic Party needs behind the scenes, the way that the Republican Party has Reince Priebus, who has a vision of what a 50-state strategy looks like and how to start winning back the landslide that we've experienced against us in state houses during the Obama presidency.
Brad, that's a great point. I mean, the Democrats lost, about half of the state legislatures. I mean, it's a huge number of Democratic officials have been bounced out of office during the Obama terms.
There's no doubt about it. It's been up and down the ballot losses for Democrats. And look, now we're in control, but we have to also learn lessons, Eric. Winning isn't everything. We have a very thin bench, and we have to do what Democrats and Harry Reid suggested, although he was not following his own rules in not having a bench and the opportunity for people to move up. We have to do that. We have to do that with minority communities. We have to do that with women. We have to do that across the board. So winning isn't everything. We need to make sure that we continue to win. And the best way to do that is enact policies that are popular and that are sound, and also have candidates that reflect the party. So Democrats have a lot of work to do, but I suggest Republicans do as well.
Yeah, as they start the Trump term. Pablo, last word. I mean, you think these tweets back and forth, you think that this is going to continue?
Well, I mean, I think that the one thing that we need to recognize from the exchange between Mr. Axelrod and President Obama is that the same sort of naivety that they came into the White House with about the reality of Republicans' ability to obstruct their policy agenda hasn't really, sort of sunk in. They haven't learned the lessons of this, which is just another indication of that the party needs new ideas, new talent, and that the old ways of the establishment need to be reevaluated. And moving forward, the message needs to be one that acknowledges that we need Republicans and we need strategy in order to have a sustainable progressive agenda in the future.
And that is going to be the turn of the page that starts January 20th. Pablo and Brad, always good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Of course.
Thank you, Eric.
Heather?
Well, coming up, consumer confidence hitting its highest mark in more than a decade. And President-elect Trump says it's all thanks to him. So is he right? Plus this.
Alexa, what's on the calendar today?
Well, activity at Trump Tower is back to normal this morning after the building, parts of it, was briefly evacuated. That was the seemingly chaotic scene yesterday that started when a suspicious package was discovered in the lobby of the New York City building. Police made visitors and tourists get out, as you saw, while the bomb squad was called in to investigate. But it turned out that the package was just a bag of children's toys. Mr. Trump was not in the building. He is spending the holiday at Mar-a-Lago in Florida.
Well, consumer confidence is at its highest level since 2001. A new report showing a surge in December. President-elect Trump tweeting this. The U.S. Consumer Confidence Index for December surged nearly 4 points to 113.7. That's the highest level in more than 15 years. Thanks, Donald. Melissa Francis is the co-host of After the Bell on the Fox Business Network, and she joins us to talk
He's
a little
very
bit
modest.
more. Isn't he modest? Yes.
Yeah.
But what, deservedly so, though. People are confident in him, and maybe perhaps confident as a result in the economy.
Absolutely. I mean, they're confident in spending. We've seen it so far this holiday season. They're looking ahead to next year and thinking that his tax plan is going to get enacted. When you break it down, it's the way we understand it. Of course, we don't know for sure all the details, and the devil's always in the details, but it looks like everyone's going to be facing lower taxes next year, so people were more free to spend. This is the month to do it. I mean, so many retailers, so many businesses, this is the time of year when they've paid their bills and they move into the black and they start making money, so you want people to feel good right now.
So when will people see if this is actually reality or wishful thinking?
No, that's a very good point. And I'm always a little bit suspicious of consumer confidence because it's asking you how you feel. You don't always act on how you say you feel. So I want to see the actual spending return numbers that will come in January to see how people spent money. It's also really important to see how much business is loosening up their capital, because that has been the story of the past 8 years, was that businesses had good earnings, they had good profits, but they were reluctant to invest, especially in this country, because they were facing so much uncertainty, tax, and regulation. Now it looks like it's a good environment, but they're not going to put their money where their mouth is until they know for sure. So we've got to see a lot of the things that Trump has promised into action, and then businesses will loosen up their spending. We could see economic growth 4, 5, some people say 6%. That would be amazing.
Yeah,
Seems like a stretch to me.
We've already seen, boosting jobs, cutting taxes, also easing regulations. There was also another number I wanted to ask you about, the consumer expectations.
Yeah.
And that's different than the consumer confidence level, but that's also up.
It's true. It's where you think your finances are going to be, where you think the economy is going to be going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sort of your hopefulness for your family. And that is important because, you spend and you make plans based on where you think we're headed. So if people feel good about the future, they're more likely to buy a new house. They're more likely to trade in that car. They're more likely to go look for another job, that, ask for that raise, all those kind of things that boost the economy overall. I mean, it's sentiment that gets people moving. When you feel like, your family's finances are tight or you feel uncertain, there's nothing anyone else can say to make you get off that dime, so to speak.
The president-elect has already done so much before he's even taken office.
Yeah.
Do you think that people will give him time, or will they kind of rush to judgment and they'll expect, more of the same, things happening quickly?
It's interesting. So I call what he's done for now tone from the top. They're not big moves, they're signals. He's telling Boeing, I'm reading the bill. And that's not a signal to Boeing, that's a signal to all manufacturers out there saying, hey, listen, guess what? I'm not wildly spending the taxpayer's dollar the way others have. I'm going to read the bill. With Carrier, he's saying, look, I want to keep jobs here. This is a huge priority for me. He's showing people what his priorities are. He has to follow through with real action on that front. He has to make it a good climate for businesses to keep jobs here, or else they won't, no matter how much he tries to twist their arm.
Right.
There's a lot of things that he has to really put in place, and I don't think they're going to give him a lot of time. I think the honeymoon period, maybe 6 months at best. I mean, he better get cracking.
Yeah, so don't throw the party too early.
That's right.
Kind of hold off a little bit. All right. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Absolutely.
Eric, what's up?
Thanks, Heather. Melissa. Well, could Moscow face some new punishment from the U.S. for those cyber attacks during the election? We'll have details on the plan that's being put together today by the White House.
And placing blame for Hillary Clinton's election loss on the head of the FBI. A former Justice Department official says Director James Comey put his thumb on the scale. Is that really the case?
Yes, the FBI director is independent, as is the Attorney General, but he's also supposed to follow the rules. The FBI director is not exempt from the rules that say if you're not going to charge someone, don't pass judgment on their conduct.
The White House is readying a response to Russia for reportedly interfering in our presidential election. Officials say the Obama administration is close to rolling out its retribution, but what will that retaliation entail? Kristen Fisher is live in Washington with the details. So, Kristen, what type of policies do you think we are talking about?
Well, we're talking about economic sanctions, diplomatic censure, and likely some kind of covert cyber operation. Now, this was first reported by the Washington Post. They say the Obama administration is still finalizing it and that an announcement about the public portions of this response could come as early as this week. Now, both the FBI and CIA are in agreement that Russia intervened in our election in order to help Mr. Trump win. But the president-elect remains skeptical, which is why, according to the Washington Post, the White House is now trying to make it very difficult for Mr. Trump to roll back any of the actions that they may take, and that could include using an executive order to impose more sanctions against Russia. Eric?
And what are those, Kristen, in Congress saying about it today?
Well, Senator Lindsey Graham said last night that 99 out of 100 senators believe the Russians did do this and that Congress is going to do something about it. Listen to what he said last night from Estonia, where a bipartisan group of senators were meeting with local officials about Russia.
Along with Senator McCain, after this trip's over, we're going to have the hearings and we're going to put sanctions together that hit Putin as an individual and his inner circle for interfering in our election. And they're doing it all over the world, not just in the United States.
So both Senator Lindsey Graham and Senator McCain say they have no doubt that Russia hacked into our political system, and they're now vowing to take action no matter what the president-elect thinks. Eric?
All right, Kristen, and we will hear a lot more from Senators Graham and McCain in just 1 hour from now. Here in America's Newsroom, we'll be interviewing them from Latvia on Russia, Israel, and a host of other issues, why they're over there, too. Thank you, Kristen.
Well, many Democrats are still going after FBI Director James Comey, blaming him for Hillary Clinton's loss. One former Justice Department spokesman putting it this way.
He sent it at a time when the FBI didn't know if they had any new information. It threw really a hand grenade into the middle of the election. And at the time, Hillary Clinton had Donald Trump on the map. The race was essentially over, and it changed the direction of the race, and I think eventually changed the outcome of the race. And that is an appalling thing for an FBI director to do.
Former Massachusetts Senator Scott Brown is a Fox News contributor, and he joins us now to talk a little bit more about this. Thank you for joining us, first of all.
Sure, Heather.
So a couple things to talk about with that statement there. A hand grenade into the election. I think it's questionable as to whether or not this, in fact, was the determining factor that changed the race for Hillary Clinton. What is your take on it?
I think that's ridiculous to think that one event would change the entire election. Bottom line is she ran a terrible race. She was a terrible candidate. People didn't like her. They didn't trust her. And she basically was outworked, especially over the last 3 weeks, not going into areas where traditionally are Democratic areas. She took those people for granted, and as a result, she lost. And the Democrats are still trying to find some type of reason. The reason is you had a terrible candidate. She didn't work hard enough, and that's why you lost. Period.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder if the Democrats may be singing a different tune had it gone the other way, the election itself. Take a look at what a couple of the Democratic leaders had to say. This is back in July, and this is the House Minority Leader on the FBI Director on July 7th. She said that he is a man of integrity and honesty. Nothing happens without him. I think he's going to be the definitive person to make the determination or the recommendation. But then changed her tune and said now the public interest would be served by the FBI providing the facts rather than allowing Republicans to stoke innuendo and falsehoods 11 days away from a presidential election. And she's not the only one. We also can go down to Harry Reid, and he said this on July 6th. The FBI, under the leadership of Comey, carried out a thorough investigation of this case. No one can question the integrity, the confidence of Director Comey. But apparently Reid himself can question that, because he then said, you rushed to take this step 11 days before a presidential election, despite the fact that, for all you know, the information you possess could be entirely duplicative of the information you already examined, which exonerated Secretary Clinton. So just another search for excuses, as you said?
Of course there are excuses, because, and that's one of the reasons that Director Comey, the FBI director, has such a long term, so that person can basically be apolitical. He went to Congress, he told Congress what he was going to do, and then he ultimately did it. I don't fault him for obligation. I believe in affirmative obligation to keep Congress apprised, as he said he would. I thought there were some various mistakes. I thought he could have at least charged Hillary Clinton with a misdemeanor, because I thought he laid out a very solid prima facie case determining that she in fact did break the law. Did it rise to the level of a felony? He said no. I thought it was at least a misdemeanor. So I thought there were some errors throughout the process, but I never questioned his integrity. I never thought that he wanted Donald Trump instead of Hillary Clinton, and I don't think the American people felt that way either. I think they felt he was just doing his job.
And there's been reports that he will make a statement, he'll have something to say following the inauguration of Donald Trump. What do you think that he can say? Is there anything that he can say that would kind of right the road?
I don't think he needs to do anything except do his job. If you want to talk about people crossing the line, how about the Bill Clinton in a plane? I mean, that was she was completely inappropriate. But here we are, we're faulting, allegedly the Democrats are trying to fault somebody for doing their job, and I would want him to do his job up until the very last day up to the election, and then after the election. And if there's something that needs to be done after, that'll shake out. But he's insulated because he is, I think it's a 10-year term if I'm not mistaken, so he's not going anywhere.
Yeah, and as you said, it's supposed to be an independent position.
Correct.
And do you think that, that will continue, or do you think that there needs to be some sort of change? Because obviously a lot of people right now do not think that that is the case on both sides.
I think he's an independent person. I think he's going to continue to do his job like he was asked to do. If he leaves that post, it's going to be by him resigning. He's not going to be forced out. That's the beauty of that position. They wanted independence, so they can't be influenced by every president who comes into office or leaves office. The whole vendetta type of thing. So, there's going to be griping, Heather. There's been griping. You still have the Democrats are still in shock. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, you know what, Hillary just ran a terrible race. It's always, it's this, it's the Russians, it's the FBI, it's this, it's that. It's like, enough already. Listen, Trump won, Hillary lost, and that's it. Time to move on and give our president-elect a chance.
Right. All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Heather.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Well, Heather, there are rising tensions between the Obama administration and our closest ally in the Middle East. Why Israeli officials are now bracing for what could come from Secretary of State Kerry in just 90 minutes from now. Of course, just weeks before the president leaves office. The Israeli ambassador to the United Nations is here live, and we will ask him. Plus, we'll have this.
Alexa, call me.
Welcome back. A murder case in Arkansas getting national attention after a warrant was issued for an Amazon Echo. Now, the device is only activated after a user says its activation word, but once on, it records snippets of conversation that are then sent to the Amazon cloud. Bentonville investigators want information from one belonging to James Andrew Bates, who is accused of strangling a man in a hot tub. Amazon has twice refused that request, but they have turned over some of the account details.
Well, Israel bracing for more attention today as U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry set to deliver a major speech in just over 1 hour from now. He'll be doing that from the State Department in Washington, talking about the Middle East peace process and U.S.-Israeli relations. This comes after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu lashed out at President Obama, saying the U.S. orchestrated that United Nations Security Council vote that condemned the continued construction of settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. The U.S., though, firing back, claiming that we did not orchestrate the vote. But now this morning, just moments ago, these tweets from the president-elect. He said, quote, "We cannot continue to let Israel be treated with such total disdain and disrespect. They used to have a great friend in the U.S., but not anymore. The beginning of the end was the horrible Iran deal, and now this, specifying the UN deal, Stay Strong, Israel, January 20th, is fast approaching." The Israeli ambassador to the United Nations is here with us this morning, Ambassador Danny Danon. Ambassador, good to see you. Thank you for coming in.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Well, Mr. Trump just said in his tweet, "Stay strong, Israel." What are you concerned about that the Secretary of State may say just over an hour from now?
First of all, we are strong. We are a strong democracy, strong nation. We will continue to be strong, and we will prevail the shameful resolution that passed at the UN last Friday. We are waiting to see Secretary Kerry's approach and his speech. We hope that he will go back to the original policy of the U.S., which called both sides to go back to direct negotiations. Because what happened on Friday, the U.S. actually and the UN told to the Palestinians, don't speak with the Israelis anymore. Come to the UN, we will support your initiatives, we will pass resolutions. You cannot actually bypass direct negotiations.
So you were saying U.S. officials specifically spoke directly with the Palestinian officials. To what meeting are you referring to?
We have the information that the U.S. was involved with this shameful resolution. And being at the UN, we are used not to be the most popular ambassador in the room, but seeing that the U.S. is not standing with us, that was very disappointing.
David Keyes, the spokesman for the Prime Minister, says that there is ironclad evidence that Jerusalem has of this, that they will hand it over to the Trump administration. Should that be made public, or what do you think it is?
We will leave it to the President-elect to decide about it. We will show him the evidence, and it's clear. And among friends, among allies, you don't handle it the way the U.S. administration handled it. You cannot agree about everything. We have disputes about the settlements. That's okay, but you don't go behind our back with the Palestinian and you pass such a one-sided resolution. You should read the resolution saying that we have no connection to the Wailing Wall, to the old city of Jerusalem. This is shameful.
Well, officials at the Security Council, they'll say they were surprised when Samantha Power, raised her hand during the abstention, most in the room expecting a veto, and there was a gasp, and they said, it wasn't premeditated.
Well, if you're familiar, and Eric, you are familiar with the Security Council, you know that the U.S. is very involved with every resolution, with every word, and especially when it comes to the Middle East and when it comes to Israel. The U.S. is the pen holder on every resolution regarding Israel, and we are appreciating that because in the past the U.S. stood with Israel, but this time the U.S. took advantage of their strengths in the Security Council to work a resolution which is completely one-sided and will not support the peace process.
Are you looking for Mr. Kerry to explain, for example, the rationale of the Obama administration? Are you looking for Mr. Kerry? Reports say that he will say that the U.S. was not so intimately involved and that he will explain the thinking. What would you want him to say? I asked about your concerns, but what would you like to see from this administration?
No, with all due respect to his speech, we will listen to it carefully, but we are concerned about the resolution that passed. Now we're hearing voices that maybe there will be another resolution at the UN Security Council.
And what could that be? A second potential
anything can pass now. After what happened on Friday, anything can pass, and we are very worried about it. And I want to recall President Obama's speech at the UN when he said, you cannot promote peace in the Middle East through the UN. So what changed now? Now all of a sudden you can do that?
In terms of the critics and the resolution itself, settlement's a violation of international law. It's an illegal land grab of Palestinian land. What do you say to those who say it is Israel that's being aggressive and proactive and basically violating international law, and this does not help the peace process, does not help a two-state solution?
I don't accept that. We have historical rights, we have legal rights, we have, according to international law, we have rights to the land in Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem. But you know what? Let's say we have a dispute about it. So we should negotiate it. You cannot bring it to the UN and have it voted. Why New Zealand and Angola should decide about the conflict we have with the Palestinians?
Well, that's the way the United Nations Security Council is set up. You have temporary members. That's that world body.
Yes, but in order to actually achieve peace, and we did it in the past, we signed an agreement with Egypt, with Jordan, through direct negotiation. Nobody will be in the Middle East to moderate the peace process. We need to do it ourselves. And by coming to the UN and bypassing the direct negotiations, you're actually telling the Palestinians, don't negotiate. Continue with the incitement. Continue to support terrorism in Israel. We will take care of everything you want here in New York.
And finally, how do you think this will play out? The Trump administration comes in January 20th. We have Mr. Trump's tweets saying it will be a new era at the UN and with Israeli-U.S. relations. I mean, if the U.S. institutes another resolution, they're trying to backtrack against this one. As I pointed out, Russia or China could veto it. What do you think will happen?
It will be hard, but I think the U.S. should restart the UN. Because we see what's happening today with the UN, it's absurd. The number of resolutions against Israel, instead of focusing in Syria, in the real atrocities, the focus with Israel, you should look where the money goes. Major part of the UN budget comes from the US. The money should go to build bridges, not to incite against Israel.
Well, the Prime Minister's already put some of the money to the UN on hold in terms of your contributions. We'll see what happens with the United States, and we'll wait for the Secretary of State to speak in just over an hour from now. Ambassador Danny Dayan, who is the Israeli ambassador to the UN. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric.
For coming in today.
Thank you.
Of course. Heather?
More from the White House, reportedly close to announcing new sanctions against Russia for meddling in our election. Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham join us live in the next hour. Two lawmakers who have been outspoken in the push to investigate the Kremlin.
And folks are dreaming of a white Christmas. Well, they may get really heavy snow for the upcoming New Year instead.